Good evening. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm acting MTA Chair and CEO Jano Lieber. I'm joined by Interim New York City Transit President Craig Cipriano, SVP of Subways Demetrius Critchlow, and Chief Customer Officer Sarah Meyer. Before we get into the storm preparations, I want to address the attempted robbery and shooting that occurred a short time ago at Union Square on the N train. We're not going to put up with this kind of stuff. The subways are safe, statistically speaking, but they also have to feel safe. And this type of activity, this type of crime is not acceptable. We're working very closely with the NYPD to make sure we apprehend the perpetrator. We're going through the video. There's a lot of video in all of our stations now. We got all of our stations have cameras, and we're going to find video of this guy, and we're going to work with the NYPD to make sure that he's apprehended. Our thoughts are obviously with the victim and everybody who watched this scary incident, but as I said, our priority is to make sure the system isn't only statistically safe, but it feels safe for New Yorkers. We want our customers back, and we're going to do everything to make sure that they feel safe there. Now, moving on to the storm. The forecast is calling for up to 6 inches of rain over a 12-hour period, with the heaviest rainfall starting overnight and carrying into mid-morning. At no point do we expect to see the type of intense rainfall over a very short term that we had during Hurricane Ida. Remember, we had 3.5 inches in 1 hour in Hurricane Ida, and that is not what is forecasted by all of the meteorologists. But we're prepared for whatever comes. Our goal every day, but especially during storms, is to make sure that we get all of the essential workers, and indeed everyone who rides the MTA system, that we get them home safely at night, and that we can get them to work or to school or to the doctor or wherever they're going the next morning. We have a detailed plan in place to protect the network and to deliver safe service throughout the MTA system during the storm. Crews from New York City Transit, which runs the subways and buses, the Long Island Railroad, Metro North, and our Bridges and Tunnels team, they've all been deployed in large numbers to strategic locations, places that we know are vulnerable to flash flooding, so that if there is flash flooding, they can respond quickly. We've actually increased the number of stations where we deploy and pre-deploy equipment and people from what it was in the past. Now, flash flooding is very unpredictable by its nature, but we do have enough experience to know where there are some locations that are especially vulnerable. So again, we prioritize those always. We have pump trains that have been deployed throughout the system. We have all this pumping infrastructure that's mobile, that's on trucks, and we have 900 pumps at 300 locations throughout the subway system. So during Hurricane Ida, we literally pumped 75 million gallons of water. We can get the water out of the system. Do not be alarmed if you see a little water on a platform, if you see water on stairs. The system is designed to deal with it, and we will be ready. The biggest constraint that we face is the city's sewers, which, as we found out again during Hurricane Ida, sometimes have their capacity overwhelmed. We don't expect that to happen tonight based on forecasts, but it is a long-term issue that we are working with the city to address. Buses. The bus network is prepared to pick up the slack in case there is any impact on the subway system. As we saw during Hurricane Ida, buses are really the backbone. They operated throughout the Hurricane Ida in the past, and the bus drivers were heroic, and we're counting on them again to do their thing, again, if there is impact to the subway system. On Metro North, personnel have been stationed in areas along the Hudson Line, which have been trouble spots before. And on the bridges and tunnels, our toll crossings, we're monitoring especially the wind conditions. You know, we have certain wind levels where we shut down the ability for box trucks or empty trucks to move across those bridges. And at some wind volumes, wind velocities, we shut the bridge down altogether, and we're ready for that as well. I really want to thank our incredible workforce in advance. They always rise to the occasion, and I'm sure tonight will not be any different. So thank you to all of the MTA workers. To the public, if you have to be out tonight, once the rain starts, please exercise caution and watch out for slippery conditions. New Yorkers still traveling can stay updated on service by checking the new digital screens in the stations. We installed literally hundreds and hundreds of digital screens during COVID. And now we have the benefit of being able to give our riders real-time information, not just of what the conditions are in any particular location, but alternatives, where you can go if for some reason you're on a line or in an area where service has been impacted. So look at the digital screens, but also look at our Twitter account and also the MTA website, new.mta.info, and the MyMTA app. The MyMTA app has current information on all of your MTA services. So there's a lot of information. Rely on social media. Don't stop watching the news. Listen to the radio and look at our MTA apps, including MyMTA. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions from our friends in the press.
Steve? Just curious what lessons were learned after Ida, how those are being put into practice now, especially operationally, where we saw trains get stuck in tunnels, riders in tunnels for a few hours. What operationally is different this storm versus Ida?
Well, the truth is, I think that we need to bear in mind that the system actually operated very successfully during Ida. We had hundreds of trains in the system when that 1 hour explosive rainfall happened during Ida, and we were able to get almost everybody home safely without any inconvenience. So the fact that there were roughly 10 trains, I believe, that got stranded and had to be brought into stations with delay, it was all done safely. So I want to emphasize, and we pumped out 75 million gallons of water, and we ran rush hour a couple hours after the rain stopped. So what Ida proves is the MTA system is incredibly resilient. That said, we also want to make sure that we're preparing for, particularly in these locations that we know have some vulnerability to flash flooding. Some of this is not, because of the way the MTA station is configured. It's because the curb has been, has disappeared over time because of the addition of asphalt. So the drainage system isn't working optimally, or the catch basins aren't as clean as they need to be. So what we do is we go there and we make sure that we optimize the conditions, that we clean the catch basins, we make sure that the drains are working everywhere, we get to the valves that are vulnerable for whatever reason, and we attack those problems. We block off the grates. All of those actions are being taken in advance, but flash flooding is unpredictable, so it's no guarantee there won't be a location or two where it hits.
Yeah, and just to follow up, we are hearing from our weather folks that there's a coastal aspect to this storm as well. The big tide of concern, I believe, is tomorrow afternoon. Obviously, things are still a little bit in flux at the Coney Island Yard. That was a problem during Sandy. Any preparations happening on the coastal side of things?
Yeah, I mean, in the Coney Island Yard, we know there's certain areas. It's a huge yard, literally I think 50 plus acres, and there's a ton of work has actually been done, which, to take all of the cabling off the ground, to have bridges where you enable people and mechanical systems and cables to move. So a lot of important work has been done, but we still move some of the rolling stock, some of the trains out of areas that are still vulnerable. That project is underway. We're surrounding the whole yard with these incredible steel flood walls, but we have taken some initial precautions, and we're confident it's going to be okay.
Right here.
How many crews do you have out for this storm? And also, are the crews to help for the flash flooding? Are the crews there to help the flash flooding from happening or cleaning up the flash flooding?
Well, both. I mean, what the crews do, and it's more than 50 stations. that we've identified as having some vulnerability. But they, as I said, they go there and they do all the precautionary stuff. They cover the vents. They make sure that the catch basins at the street level, not in the subway, at the street level are clear so there isn't water that's being pushed into the subway. They close the valves. They ready all of the pumping capacity. So all of that work is being done. There are hundreds and hundreds of people who have been called back into service to do all those preparations. So that's well underway. And they will stay there, not every single one, but a lot of them are going to stay out there to monitor the situation as it unfolds, and we will be closely monitoring it. We have a very strong communication system with the city, city DEP, which is the guys who run the sewage system and the drainage system, with City Hall, the NYPD, FDNY, and that's all in place.
You mentioned that you're targeting specific subway stations. Can you name a few of those that are higher risk for flooding?
Why don't I follow up with you separately? But I think that the important thing is many of them are not at the coastal areas. What you're seeing is areas that are maybe at higher ground, but which have unique conditions, whether the incline of the street creates a bowl, or that the curb has disappeared because asphalt has been installed on top of the streets over time, so drainage isn't operating properly, or the capacity of the sewer system in some areas isn't what's needed in that particular area. So we know where those areas are, and we're monitoring them. But flash flooding is unpredictable, as we all know. So there's no guarantee it'll be just those 50 locations, but we're ready.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Greg.
Last time we saw a lot of videos of the drains in the stations, platforms perhaps starting to spill over. What's the process if subway crews see that? Kind of walk me through how you're going to get information from the folks in the system currently.
Well, I mean, obviously, the center of our subway management system is the RCC, the Rail Control Center. So all of the station agents know to contact the Rail Control Center when there is a condition that, some condition that gives concern or creates a safety hazard or is special in some bad way. So that's the way that we maintain communications and react. And all of the crews which have been dispatched around the system know to do that. But the important thing is what you saw back in Hurricane Ida was not an MTA a cascade or a waterfall into the MTA system. It was literally a city sewer, which happens to run under one of the platforms, kind of popping up its manhole and turning into a geyser, because again, the sewer didn't have enough capacity. So that's the long-term issue we got to address together with our friends in the city. But in the meantime, we're pretty confident we can protect the subway.
In terms of those pre-deployment crews, like what time are they heading out tonight, or are they already out tonight to start preparing at those 50 stations?
Craig, Demetrius?
So we manned our control center starting at 4 p.m. this afternoon, and most of our crews started at the locations themselves as of 6 p.m. tonight. So they're already in place, ready for whatever comes our way.
And we keep talking about, sorry, one more, just because we keep talking about Ida, but there were also a couple of crazy thunderstorms back in the summer where we saw also the crazy viral videos of flooding and just platforms kind of overflowing. So it's not just in, the isolated remnants of Hurricane Ida, the most recent. We saw this a couple of other times this summer. As you keep saying, flash flooding is super unpredictable, but right. In terms of pumping out, millions of gallons of water, at what point do you dive into that?
Pardon the pun. But what you need to know is that video that you're talking about, which was not at Ida but before, was the result of not the flooding conditions necessarily, but there was a sewer pipe that broke and the drain that was in the subway on that one side of the subway station was clogged. So what we do is go out and make sure that doesn't happen, that the clogging of a simple thing like unclogging a drain is addressed. As it happens in that one wacky video that went viral with the woman walking through waist-high water, the other side of the station was completely clean. So what we got to do is make sure that the drains, as simple as keeping drains open and also working with the city to make sure that if sewers are overwhelmed or there's a drain pipe that breaks, that it's addressed promptly in that case.
I guess to wrap things in a tidy bow here, how much of this is actually in your control in terms of the flash flooding, in terms of, you know, the viral videos that we always seem to see? How much of this is within the MTA's control to prevent, and how much of this can you just say, you know, this is something that the city needs to fix and we have to live with it until then?
Well, listen, you know, the important thing is that we have to maintain service. That is our first obligation, is to maintain service and maintain safety. And we can do that because we have this amazing capacity to pump water out of the system. 75 million gallons were pumped out in the couple days around Ida. We do 14 million gallons a day on a dry day. So we have the capacity to deal with water. This is a system that is not going to be impenetrable to water. That's what we can do. You know, obviously we want to make sure that in the era of climate change, there isn't water coming off of the street where it's supposed to be drained by the city drainage system. That we want the city to grow its sewer capacity to deal with, you know, maybe these extreme weather events are here to stay in the era of climate change. But we sure can pump water out, we can deal with water, and we're going to keep running for New Yorkers.